Welcome, everyone. This is Mary Grace Gardner, and today I have a special guest with us. Today, I am interviewing Samara Bay, who is an author and speech coach whose clients range from candidates for U.S. Congress to C-suite executives, international diplomats, high school girls, and Hollywood celebrities. Her Penguin Random House book, Permission to Speak, is a revolution in how to think about your voice and everyone else's. And it is available for pre-order now at samarabay.com. I have ordered the book and I hope you do as well. So excited to have you here with us today, Samara.
Thank you. Hi, I'm thrilled to be here.
So Samara and I actually met in person, which is rare because I had been not going to conferences for a while due to the pandemic. And the very first one I went to in person, I got to meet Samara and was so excited about that. We were both in Los Angeles and we were in town because of a conference, a mastermind put together by Rachel Rogers. And she is a business owner. You should also look her up too if you haven't followed her on social media. But Samara and I had the great fortune of actually sitting across from each other at a dinner hosted by Sage Polaris, who is also a colleague of ours. And I noticed Samara had this necklace that said permission, which I think she's wearing right now, right? And that opened up a whole also conversation around telling our stories. And I know students, right, particularly right now, if you're watching this at the time of this live stream, students who are high school seniors are actively working on their college application essays. And I thought I should bring Samara on this show because one of the things I keep hearing students talk about is feeling like they're not sure if their story is good enough to put on a college application, or wondering if they should be saying something different, or they need to present themselves in a way that the college wants to see. And I know Samara has a lot of great thoughts on that. So Samara, why don't we go ahead and first start off by sharing with the audience a little bit more about what you do. I know I shared that at the top of this interview, but let us know a little bit more about what you do.
So I have an interesting background in Hollywood coaching actors on their accents and dialects. And then more and more around the 2018 midterms, I got involved with women who are running for office. So it's a completely different industry, right? Helping politicians and then my friends who are entrepreneurs and business people with pitching and with how to talk about themselves in public. But there is some overlap, because our voices are such a reflection of our identity. So it is accent, but it's also all the choices that we make about how to sort of show up when we show up, and what the habits are that we've picked up to hide. So I'm really, really interested in this sort of emotional and psychological part of finding our voice. And some of that obviously also has to do with how we tell our stories. So I'm thrilled to be here to talk about that with you.
And Samara and I got into an Instagram DM conversation about voice and people feeling like it's okay to tell their story. So we'll dive into that in a few moments. Samara, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your college education? Where did you go to school? Tell us about your degrees and tell us any other background related to
Sure. I decided when I was 10 that I was going to be a regional Shakespeare actress, like somehow, popping up in theaters around the country, making no money, having no, long-term connections. It was obviously a romantic idea that I had at 10 because I had seen some really, really good, like sort of modern Shakespeare in my hometown. I grew up in Santa Cruz, California. But I really, in a way, followed that path until my 30s, my late 20s, early 30s. But I did it in a funny way because I got into Princeton University. And that is not a school that is necessarily known for, like, if you want to be an actress, right? But I had taken a big swing. I had also applied to Brown and not gotten in, which was interesting. But when I got into Princeton, I thought, I actually can't say no. I had grown up in California, so it also was an opportunity to get closer to New York, to get, to experience the East Coast. And I honestly loved it, partly because there was that those of us who did do theater were just making it ourselves. We really had free reign and we all became sort of producers. And then I got into Brown, as it turns out, for graduate school for an MFA in acting, because all the Broadway actors that I knew had MFAs, masters in acting, which is a 3-year sort of conservatory program with lots of yoga and speech classes, as well as, actual acting classes. And then the speech part of it is really what ended up taking off and becoming my career out of that, as well as acting for a while.
So you had always kind of known what it is that you wanted to do, even that 10-year-old version of
I
yourself.
mean, yes, and it really shifted. Like, what I think now is that 10-year-old me sat in a gorgeous outdoor redwood forest of a theater, which is what we had in Santa Cruz. And the fog, the sort of Pacific Northwest fog would start to come in, and the lights would light up the fog and the actors. And there was something super magical about sitting there and seeing a story being told and everybody kind of breathing as one. And I thought, I want that. But that is what evolved. So in a way, I'm still in this world of helping people breathe together as one, or tell a story together, or feel connection, like human connection, which is what I think public speaking is really about and rarely taught that way. But yes, the actual literal 10-year-old, so then I'm going to become an actor, is what shifted. But the spirit of it stayed the same.
And this is why, to the audience watching this, I really thought it was important for Samara to come on to the show, because when it comes to writing your college application essays, a lot of times what students miss is that this is actually an exquisite time to really practice those storytelling skills in essay writing form. Oftentimes people are thinking it's a research paper I'm writing, right? Or it's just a regular high school essay I'm writing, but really it's about you and your stories, and being able to tell them in whatever format is being asked of you for the college application. But it's actually storytelling that we're trying to help cultivate in these essays. And so, Samara, I don't want to miss the opportunity to ask you about your two colleges that you attended. I'm sure people are interested. So Princeton, Brown. What's one thing that either surprised you or was unexpected to you about Princeton, and then same thing about Brown?
Ooh, I thought you were going to ask about my application to those schools, but my, I'm getting over a cold. Sorry, everybody, but turns out non-COVID can also still happen to us, right? I would say Princeton, the biggest surprise was what I've already referenced, that actually finding my people there and finding theater people in a school that is not known for being theater gave us even more of a sense of a tribe, a group that really made stuff together and watched out for each other. And I'm still in touch with a lot of those friends, and our careers have taken all kinds of weird turns. One of them is a travel writer going all around the world, writing about sustainable wine and travel, but he does videos. And is his video content informed by the fact that we all made theater together and knew how to sort of perform in a moment that matters? I'd say yeah. So for Princeton, it was less the academics, which were totally fine, but I'd say a lot more straightforward, just exactly what I expected, and more the social side of it, which was really joyful and much more theater based than I thought, just by finding my people. Brown, rather, I'd actually say the opposite. It was a really rough 3 years. It was very cold in Providence, Rhode Island, and the group was much smaller. It was 8 male, 8 female, and it just was a group that didn't gel. So I just remember feeling really lonely those 3 years. And it was my early 20s, and it was a lot of time of, when you're working on being an actor, you're really working on how to be vulnerable and sit with that discomfort in front of other people. And there's actually some relevance for storytelling in that, which I'm happy to kind of dig into a little bit. But it is very hard to feel vulnerable in a space that doesn't feel safe. And I don't mean unsafe, like physically dangerous, but I just didn't feel emotionally supported in that space. And I think a lot of us, now 15 years later, we're all reconnecting and going, oh, you felt that way too? We all just were super self-absorbed, and early 20s is such a strange time when you're trying to figure out who you are. So I don't really blame the school, but I can't separate my experience from, that when you ask the surprising part of that experience. I was desperate to go to MFA acting school to sort of validate my acting chops, but the physical experience wasn't what I was hoping for.
I think one thing that you're highlighting that's sometimes people are surprised by is the community of your cohort, right? And
I mean, you're right. That's the theme in both cases, right? And the huge difference. And in a way, I was so supported and so supportive. Like I was really part of that community in college, that I was spoiled. I mean, in that way, it's fine, but I didn't know that it couldn't be like that. And then, yeah, grad school was a real disappointment because of that.
And sometimes students are making these judgments of which school they should go to because of what they see on a website, and then the actual feel when they're there, it can be quite different. I remember my first year at UCLA, and our entire dorm floor were best friends. We were like a family. We still keep in touch today, and they are all brilliant, right? They are all doing wonderful, amazing things. And we thought that was just how college was. So we
Mhm.
didn't realize that was any different of an experience than anyone else in the dorms. So when people on the different floors, we were on the top floor, on the 7th floor, and when people on different floors would come up to our floor, we just thought, that's just normal. When we started visiting the other floors, we realized, oh, they don't have the same type of environment and same type of support. And that's why they're all coming to our floor, because they're not,
Well,
it's very,
completely. This is reminding me that in the very middle of grad school, one thing that you all probably heard when I was talking about that was how insular our program was. It was really separate from the rest of the university. And then I met a really nice guy. I started dating him in the middle of grad school, and he was great, but his community was a different one. And I suddenly, instantly, the second half of grad school was so much better just by virtue of expanding my horizons and finding other people. And then I could go back to this group that was small and not totally working for me with newfound, joy and support and whatever. And that just made me, come into myself in a different way. So yes, there's sort of the luck of the draw with what floor you're on.
it does.
And then
Yeah.
where you sojourn off to find other floors that are more joyful.
Yeah. Or like you just in that example there of what you did to kind of find a different cohort of folks to connect with. I'm going to pivot now over to storytelling now. And one of the things that, especially in this season, college applications are due soon. And in my email list, when folks are replying, and I'm seeing in my social media on TikTok, people are also telling me that they are feeling scared about telling their stories. And it could be for a variety of reasons. Could be they feel like it's not good enough, it's too small, it's maybe too much. So it's a big range. And so students are worried, scared. There's all sorts of words they use to describe why they cannot write their story. And I'd love to hear what would be your advice to these students who are going through these emotions as they're figuring out how to display themselves in essay format.
Yeah. There's so many books out there on storytelling, on the sort of like practical of the beginning, middle, and end, and where you would jump yourself into, where you would start the story. But I think they miss what you're talking about and what I'm really interested in supporting, which is that moment before we decide to tell our story, which is when we're trying to decide, is it worth it? Is it good enough? Am I good enough? The voices in our head, which sometimes we can notice. That voice isn't very nice, but sometimes it just sounds like wisdom, right? The voice in our head that says your story isn't worth it, or your story is too scary to tell, or your story is, right? That stops us from writing our story. So here's a few thoughts. Obviously, that's a range of inner voices. So I'm interested in sort of, talking about them separately. But the first thought I want to offer is that a lot of us have breathed in this sort of cultural truthiness that stories have to be epic. This dates back to like Joseph Campbell and the idea of a hero's journey. And we see it in things like Star Wars, right? The hero's journey is that the hero leaves something comfortable, goes on an adventure or a quest. Scary things happen that test them, that often make them have to be like physically brave or violent. And then they get what they need and they come back home a different person. That doesn't feel relevant to a single moment of my life. And yet, a tiny moment when somebody says a sentence that ends up changing how I think about something is its own hero's journey. It's a tiny, tiny opposite of epic, slice of a moment, or the moment I saw a meme and I thought, oh, whoa, wait, that actually changes. Oh, wait, oh, wait. Or I worked with a lot of women who were running for office in the 2018 midterms, and I did this through moveon.org, and they gave me almost no instruction. They just were like, it's pro bono, you got this, we're throwing you people. And I was like, let's find out if I'm useful, right? But the only thing that they told me was, we're noticing that women who are running for office for the first time, so you can imagine, right? They care a lot. They are a representative of their neighborhood, but they had a moment where they were like, oh God, I think it has to be me. This person's not running that. 6 friends have told me I think it's me. They were having trouble telling their I think it's me story, their moment of decision. They're great at talking about their background, maybe like, here's where I was born, here's my connection to the area. And they're great at talking policy. Here's what I want to do in the future. And they would skip over here's why I decided to run. And the reason I realized that that's so useful, and maybe you're already thinking a little bit about what your moment of here's when I decided to anything, right? The reason that it's extremely, more than we've ever been told societally, useful to honor what that moment of decision was, and maybe kind of write about that, is that moments of decision are revealing of our character. They tell people what we value. And that can be a decision that is tiny, right? A friend treated me badly and I decided enough is enough. Or I got into the school play and I got into volleyball and I couldn't decide because it felt like they were going to lead my life down 2 different paths. And here's how I decided which one to do. Or, something more personal. My parents got divorced and I decided I needed to tell them blah, blah, blah. But thinking of a moment of a decision as an inner epic journey is something that, we can all do. Stuff will come up around it, right? Why is my story not good enough? But perhaps you can allow that to go to the side for just a moment and live inside of that decision. How did I make that truth? Like actual truth. We can judge it if it needs to be, if the truth was like over 6 months and we want to kind of make it feel like it happened in a quicker period of time. But first, just go with the actual truth, because sometimes that's more interesting and more satisfying than making something feel more like a story in this way that we've heard stories before, right? So maybe it was a friend who suggested it and then you said no. And then like you took a shower and you were like, wait, but what if, right? Those are allowed to be. And then of course you can tell the before and the after and all of that, but you almost don't have to, because actually a moment of decision is its own story. And how your mind works is what we want to know. I think it's what college application people want to know. And the facts about your life that you can reveal inside of that is helpful for specificity, right? It's helpful so we know how you're different from someone else. So you own the things that are real about you. And, we've talked a little bit off camera about what some of those real things are, and whether you're in a position where you have so many accomplishments, but you kind of have some imposter syndrome that you're dealing with, or if you're in a situation where you're doing something that feels really deeply embarrassing or complicated, like the amount of after school work that you have to do to make money, honoring that those feelings that you have inside of either one of those or anything in the middle, honoring that those feelings are legitimate is part of becoming the person we want to be, right? I almost feel, as I talk about this, I'm always interested in thinking about like, what are new sounds of leadership? And I partly talk about this in a business context, but I also talk about it with high schoolers, right? The idea of like owning that moment or owning the reality of our life is a leadership move. It's me saying, for anybody coming up after me, for my own, younger siblings, for a younger cousin, for somebody I can imagine that needs to hear my words, what could I say for them that's true?
That ownership that you're highlighting, I think, is where students are oftentimes surprised when they're going through the reflection of, how do I answer this essay? Let me do a quick Google search on examples, or should I already know the answer and just start typing? That requires so much reflection that oftentimes
True.
students are surprised when they budget 30 minutes to write the essay. Well,
Yeah.
actually, no.
Oh
Might
my
need some
God.
time to actually reflect, right? Why did you make the decisions you did?
One habit that I have gotten into, because I wrote this book and it was hard writing a book. You've probably heard people say that, but it legit
Yeah.
is that I started pressing record on the voice memos in my phone app more often than I had been, and honoring that, like, sometimes my way of figuring out not even the right way to say something, but figuring out what I actually think is best done out loud. So of course, if we can use a friend, that's cool. But in another way, it's almost more, intimate and real to just take out any distractions, turn on that recording device and talk to yourself. How do I actually feel? In my case, I pitched a book about public speaking, about redefining what it is and what our relationship is to our voice. And then I had these moments where I was like, I pressed record and was like, why do I care about public speaking? Why does anybody care about public? What is it that makes any of us want to get in front of other people and do this scary thing? I mean, every single human's nervous system does something in front of people. Why do we do it anyway? And just asking myself those questions and then trying to answer, well, maybe it's, and feeling what felt true and what gave me a little tiny bit of sense of mischief or joy, which is also a huge suggestion I have for everybody here, right? Our stories don't have to be joyful in any way, but the idea of telling them when we find something that goes, ooh, oh, ooh, oh, right? That's beyond words. It just makes us go, oh, that's such a good sign, right? Rather than like, oh, the slog of telling that one. Oh, sometimes we have to do that as well. But if we can find a way in that feels a little tiny bit, ooh, it will make the whole thing go a lot better.
I love that a voice memo idea of for students who are younger, you're not in the college application essay writing process yet. This is something you could do now as your real time living, whatever it is you're living is capturing reflections, right? So it could be voicemail memo, it could be journaling, it could be a private social media where you're just capturing your thoughts or whatever it might be. And you can look back and say, here are a couple of years of my thought process, right? And what I think 4 years ago may not be what I think today, right? And that's okay with your evolution of processing and reflection. But I love that giving yourself different forms of medium to express those thoughts, because it doesn't so eloquently come out when you're staring at the screen and the blinking cursor, trying to figure out all the things. You need some time to process. You need some time
My
to.
mom has always said to me, starting in high school, don't get it right, get it written,
Yes.
which is like 100-year-old, quote, but don't get it right, get it written is so freeing. It's some version of that, perfection is the enemy of the good, but it's just like, get a bad first draft out that's bad in terms of like you're not paying attention to the whatever sentence structure, but that's good in terms of trying to capture something true, something that rings true to you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so much fear in getting it wrong. And
I know.
one of the things over the summer, I run these college application essay workshops. Over the summer, we work with students so that they can get their first draft done and do it with a supportive cohort. And it's to just get it done. Don't judge yourself in the process. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? Write it down, because once that first go happens, you realize it's not that bad. It's not that bad to go through that and express. And you probably have a lot more to say than you think you do. So this is one thing I want to make sure I explore with you. And for folks who are watching this on Facebook Live, go ahead and let Samara know if you've got any questions. We'll come back and answer them. Or if you're watching this on the YouTube stream, make sure to let us know your questions in the comments below. So one thing I also notice students feeling is just all sorts of discomfort about their stories. So let me give you a couple examples. I had a student who always felt, no matter what her ideas were, that they were cheesy. Oh, this is cheesy. Oh, this feels like a Hallmark movie that I'm about to put together. Or, oh, do I put these details in there? And sometimes it's pretty, for me anyways, I feel like every student I've ever encountered has a special story. Their story matters. Their story, big or small, whatever size, there's something important that they have to share. However, there's always this block, no matter which student it is I work with, where they have this discomfort of expressing their story, feeling either that it's cheesy or corny or just this feeling of resistance.
Can I respond to that, or did you have
Can you
another
speak
part?
more? Please.
It's such a good question, and I'm so there with you. For those of you who feel this way, and here's the secret. It's quite a setup, isn't it? Here's the secret. Being vulnerable, by which in this case I mean being emotionally available, saying when something actually felt big, is a brave act in a cynical world. Being cynical, by which I mean going, or whatever, is the seemingly power move that a lot of us have learned in order to hide what really truly matters to us, to keep us safe. That's how life works. I mean, that's how communication works. If we choose not to be honest about what's truly important to us, but rather play it off like it's no big deal, we're protecting ourselves from other people knowing what we really care about, from other people feeling we're inconvenient if they're not in the mood to see our real anger or our real enthusiasm. You know, there's all kinds of reasons to seem cool so that we don't seem like we care too much. These are all incredible defense mechanisms we have all learned to get by. And so they have served you well in certain rooms. And then for the entire rest of your life, from this moment onward, you get to think, where can I not do that? Where can I ease in a little bit of the emotional truth of how much I care? And the answer is not every room and not every space, but an essay about what matters is such a lovely opportunity to work on, to practice, right? How do I say something a little truer and a little more honest and stand by what matters to me rather than pretending it doesn't matter to me? I call this in the public speaking world, caring out loud. How do we talk about what we care about like we care about it? It's easy actually to talk about what we care about and act like we don't. Or for any of you who have ever worked in customer service, right? Worked as a barista or whatever, it's also for many of us easier to talk about what we don't care about, but act like we do. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, right? The sort of cheesy over the top thing. But to talk about what we care about, the amount, and sound like we actually care about it, the amount that we care about it, it's a very, very interesting challenge for literally everyone. This is not just like an, if you're a teenager, this is hard kind of thing. But if you're a teenager, you're in a position right now to start to figure out your own relationship to being more vulnerable in that way, to being braver, to courageously say, I'm talking about something that matters to me, and I'm going to make it clear that it actually matters to me. And don't apologize after. And that's an out loud challenge, right? And it's in a writing challenge. And when we hear that voice cheesy, that's that voice saying, don't inconvenience anybody, don't make, don't, da, 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 da. And you're like, thank you, voice. You have kept me safe till now. I'm interested in something bigger.
Oh my gosh, it's so powerful to, I'm gonna use your book title, to give yourself that permission of it's okay for me to share these thoughts. It's okay for me to care, because that is a number one thing I am seeing, where people are afraid of rejection, right? Afraid of the no, because an application to a dream school for them, for the student, there's a lot weighing on it. And to feel like I'm going to be vulnerable to people I do not know, who I will never meet, who are reading my essays.
This is the biggest crazy of doing this kind of work, of being more vulnerable. We think in that moment, the safe choice is to just sound as smart as possible and to, whatever, fill in the blank, right? To do something that's safer. The safe choice is to do something safe, and safe by, in this case, I mean, they'll say yes to me. I will shave off my weirdness and be as generic as possible as the example of the best version of a student that I can be. And the reality is we will never make as big an impact as we do if we are specific and personal and as weird as we truly are. That is actually the secret to how to make an impact. And you know what? All of you listening on some level know this, right? Because who do you watch and actually enjoy listening to? What big speeches, or what, YouTube people, or what anything, like who do you watch, and what are the moments that really make you trust them? And I can guarantee it's the moments when they say something that matters to them, like it matters to them. And we don't really trust somebody when they don't do that, when they avoid it. They seem cool, but I mean, cool doesn't always code for trustworthy, right? Cool is like, what's behind the veneer? I don't get it. I don't know it. You're super cool, super intimidating, but I don't trust you. And I'd love us to all come out from behind that veneer for these moments that matter, like this essay.
So for the students who are younger, who are not yet at that phase of writing their application, and they're not at that phase yet, what are some things they could be doing kind of on a daily basis to build that level of comfort, that level of permission to let themselves be vulnerable? What are some ways that you think that they can start?
It's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think it's sort of for each of you to think through, like, what are, maybe offer yourself a little challenge that, like, for the next 5 days, I will find one opportunity a day to be a little bit more honest about how much I'm emotionally invested, how much I care, than I would have. Like, if my instincts are saying resist, 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 scary, where can I go? Oh, but I'm going to just open up a little bit. I'm going to open my heart just a little, right? Just for 5 days of a challenge. But the other is to start noticing. I actually suggest this to a lot of people. Start noticing the people who you love to listen to. They can be actors, they can be moments in a TV show or whatever, or in real life, right? I mean, a really, really massive and heavy example is the Parkland students. But after that shooting, the way that those students who really took on, right, leadership roles stood there at a microphone and said true things is a great example of somebody that we can watch and say, not I need to sound like them, but they give me permission to sound like me. And make a list. I mean, start to list voices you love. Our culture is so obsessed with talking about how you hate someone's voice and you hate your own voice, but start to think about voices you love as like kind of a muscle to flex. And I think that makes a huge difference in, like, oh, there's actually people out there all over who make me lean in, who don't follow these sort of rules about hiding, but rather do some interesting showing up.
I love that intentionality of, because we oftentimes don't take stock of who are we paying attention to? Why do we like what they're sharing? What kind of stories are they sharing, right? We just are gravitating towards that without realizing why. And I love that perspective of, actually, why don't we take stock of what's happening and then figure out for ourselves what might we want to incorporate, right? What it's more of.
Totally. Yeah.
So any final words for any of the families or students who are watching this?
No, I kind of would, I wish that I could see what is going through each of your minds right now so that I could sort of respond to that. But of course, the overall, the universal is going to always come back to this idea of permission, that so many of us just have shoulds in our mind, which is based on really hundreds of years of messaging, or as I like to say, bad advice about how to kind of show up as a grown-up, how to be a person, how to, you know, basically they all amount to some version of control. The out loud version is definitely like, keep your voice low, speak at a slower pace, right? Use your hands and very specific gestures. And then there's writing versions of this too. And I kind of want to say that is not where we're ever going to find joy. It's not where we're ever going to surprise ourselves, surprise our reader. And that saying something true in a way that hasn't been said before, because we decide that it's a leadership act and it's a courageous act to say it our way, is the future. And it's the future I want to live in. So I hope you take up that mantle.
I love that. Samara Bay. So if folks want to follow you and learn more about you, where should they go?
My favorite is Instagram at Samara Bay. And also, you know, go to samarabay.com and check out this book. It's coming out in February, so like 3 months from now. And I just got off a call today with Penguin Random House, my amazing publishers, when we're talking about coming up with some lovely gifts for people who pre-order the book. So pre-order it. And, the book is for you. It's for you. It's for the future that we all want to be in.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your book, Samara, and we'll make sure to link in the show notes all this information. Samara, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.